Hey folks, thanks for jumping on. We're going to go ahead and give it a couple minutes here, and then I will turn it over to Jeremy so that we can get started with the ITBM How-To Clinic. We'll get started probably around 11:03, just to make sure everybody has a chance to join. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here, and then I'll turn it over to Jeremy in just a second, since he's the actual expert in everything ITBM. What we want to talk about today is how to get started with your deployment of ServiceNow, your ServiceNow instance for ITBM, and start getting value out of that. So this session is going to be designed to connect you to the resources, to show you the value that you could be seeing or that you will see as you stand up your ServiceNow instance and get more and more momentum behind it. And then we'll look at the steps that you need to take to continue moving forward with ServiceNow and what you can expect to see as you do so. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeremy Kahn, who is the real expert on today's call, and let him take it from there.
Sounds good. Thanks, Zach. Let me go ahead and share my screen here, and let's go ahead and get started. All right. Just to reintroduce myself, my name is Jeremy Kahn. I'm a solution consultant within our IT business management practice over here at ServiceNow. Thank you for joining today's session on aligning strategy and work with ITBM. This is our how-to clinic and guide on getting set up with ITBM and your road to getting set up with PPM as well. So before we go ahead and get started, just wanted to quickly preface the overall presentation with a couple of links and resources that you're able to leverage. So you can see here on the screen here that the ServiceNow ecosystem is quite expansive. You can actually leverage a lot of different resources, a lot of different hyperlinks and enablement areas in order to really get best set up with your ITBM journey. So make sure to go ahead and navigate through all the different resources to be able to get up and running. In today's session, we'll cover a couple of key concepts, beginning with how to get started with your ITBM implementation. We'll go over some of the fundamentals around the sort of most basic understanding of what you need to get set up. And then we'll get into more of the key concepts and skills to be able to leverage ITBM standard. And last but not least, some best practices and additional resources to really understand what you'll need to be successful in your ITBM journey. As far as today's agenda will go, we'll be going through a couple of key components. We'll kick things off with aligning goals to work and understanding how we can begin to become more strategic with our ITBM investments. Then we'll get into setting up those ITBM goals. How can we begin to become more strategic with the business? And then we'll get into how ITBM works as a whole, the demand and project planning, some examples around that, and then next steps following. There are also a couple of plugins that we're also happy to provide after this session, and that you can also see on the screen here, that also enable you to activate various parts of the platform that really enable the project manager and your PMO delivery team to get started with PPM and ITBM. Now, kicking things off with aligning goals and work. Some best practices for demand management. In order to align goals and work, some of the best practices around this, especially in the context of IT business management within demand management, is really understanding how you can leverage different demand types. Fields and process flows can quickly route and align work to really understand what needs to be reported on, what sort of metrics are driven, and what areas of the business really need work to be focused on. Assignment groups don't really have to map one-to-one to your organizational structure. This is something that many customers do struggle with, but understanding that the assignment groups can be a logical model of who will be doing the work. So understanding this will enable you to design a better process flow within your demand management practice. You can also understand that it's important to carefully choose the various stakeholders and point out at which points are they engaged within the business. So understanding at which logical point in time would a stakeholder make sense to take on for a specific assignment. You can also tailor assessments to various business needs and demand types to drive those apples to apples conversions. Enabling careful approval usage will also help to streamline the overall process. Over or improper use will cause bottlenecks in your process. So making sure that you have an appropriate approval process will enable you to become more smooth with ITBM and demand management. And don't be scared of ideas. ServiceNow offers a fantastic idea management module that provides a lot of visibility into the early demand pipeline and provides an understanding of the true level of demand and is a useful data point for executives to be able to view upon. Accepting work into the process should not be seen as acceptance of that work for eventual execution, meaning that you should always keep in mind that any sort of intake stream should be evaluated, whether by various key stakeholders or by your demand or project manager. In today's world of digital transformation, it's really not enough for the CIO to be invited to the table anymore with the business. CIOs need to begin to evolve and measure. They're measured on how much they spend and how much they contribute to the profit and success of the business. So in other words, organizations today, a CEO is constantly wondering what will happen to the organization if we don't deliver on our strategic goals. However, a CIO is focused on innovation and improving the bottom line, making great experiences for our customers. And today, we're going to show you how an organization relies on the ServiceNow platform to enable our executives, our CIOs, and knowledge workers throughout the enterprise to work effortlessly across teams, silos, and systems to manage their strategy, operations, service delivery, projects, and applications on ServiceNow's single system of action. ServiceNow provides insights for planning on a continuous basis and adapting to changing priorities. Decision makers have real-time visibility into application data and project data to make informed decisions continuously, not just on an annual basis, but on a continuing and reoccurring basis. And they can ensure output of work is moving the needle on business goals. For example, improving customer satisfaction score on an internal application that is affecting a strategic outcome. You're also able to prioritize the right work with ServiceNow Demand Management. You can define the goals based on a top-down strategy, centralize demands anywhere on the platform, leveraging demand management, application portfolio, business services, and owners, enterprise architects, and the help desk can begin to centralize those strategic requests from the business to IT and automate the steps in the investment decision process, ultimately helping them decide what to do, what can be governed and automated to ensure that the work that you're doing is aligned to strategic goals. Projects can also be created directly from the request and balanced against all of the other work in the application and project portfolio. Now we're going to get into an exercise here to understand overall demand management in just a second here. But before we do so, we want to get a fundamental understanding of demand management as a whole. The objective of demand management, as you can see on the right here, is to centralize and focus on business and IT demands. We can also structure and rationalize the decision processes for new products and services and facilitate project initiation for more efficient execution. The demand screening and capabilities of our demand management module involve assessment through questionnaires, work alignment on goals and strategy through demand arbitration and prioritization, and demand grouping through conversion to projects, enhancements, and changes, ultimately leading to a demand being a very flexible entity. And why ServiceNow? Well, because ServiceNow offers a multifaceted way of making sure that you can submit those ideas and demands through a single portal. You can also directly link your initiatives, whether they're demands or ideas, to various projects, software development initiatives, or anything part of your IT service management change processes. Some of the goals of IT business management are focused around the overall product suite. As you can see, apologies for that. As you can see, across the overall product suite, you're also able to view the various units of business across application portfolio. You can see that IT business management focuses on the business strategy, capability planning, and the overall application and technology that's within our infrastructure today. Within project portfolio management, we can see that the overall focus here is around project and project management, making sure that our resources are well allocated, our demands are centralized and focused, and making sure that our ideas are geared towards some sort of strategic initiative. Within the Agile development module, you'll see that Agile becomes a conversation in which when we're talking about a hybrid model or a hybrid approach of project management. We can see a scaled Agile portfolio come into play for more mature organizations, but we can also see Agile coming into play as a concept as we begin working in more cross-functional teams. And on the topic of cross-functional teams, we can also see DevOps becoming a topic of conversation, where we're able to automate releases and changes, work within cross-functional insights, and continuously govern our organization and teams. It's constantly important to deliver faster value. We need to ensure that we need visibility into all of the work that we're doing, alignment to make sure that we are in sync with the business strategy, and then you can improve and deliver business value with higher velocity. And the ServiceNow platform enables the IT value chain to meet all of these business strategies and the needs on the right-hand side, as you can see, the various aspects to the business. And our vision is that there always is a better way to work. At ServiceNow, we provide a common platform where all team members can work in the same single platform with the complete picture of what we're working on and where to invest, as well as the outcomes we are achieving. In short, we provide visibility, alignment, as well as velocity for our customers and organizations. Across the overall organization, we can ultimately understand the overall maturity as we onboard a product like demand management or like IT business management as a whole. We can see here that we at ServiceNow take a crawl, walk, run approach to adoption of our product. So we'll see here in the middle section that most PMOs onboard a specific product set before going ahead and adopting every product within the overall ecosystem. A majority of our customers will focus in on demand and project as an initial concept. Then they'll focus in on program, portfolio, and resource management. We then get into that walking stage where we'll then introduce financial planning, time management, as well as the overall agile and scaled agile components as well. Test management also comes into play later down the line, but this is only for organizations who wish to leverage test management within their ServiceNow environment. And you can see that maturity across PPM is really accomplished through a concurrent approach versus a sequential approach, meaning that you can adopt multiple products in parallel rather than having to adopt one product at a time, meaning that this accelerates your time to value within the adoption of the product. Now we're going to go ahead and get into a lab work here. Feel free to follow along and feel free to just go ahead and listen into our lab and exercise as we walk through a couple of examples and views here as we go through the overall module itself. So the first thing that we wanted to go ahead and navigate to is our ServiceNow environment. And the first thing that I'm going to be doing is going ahead and logging into the system as Brian Marshall, who is our business review manager here today. Now, Brian is an end user who is tasked with a couple of things. He's going to go ahead and log into the system and navigate to the list of demands as shown on the screen here. Once he logs into his system and navigates to the list of demands, we can see that ServiceNow provides a single location for managing all demand, both strategic and operational. Demands can be thought of as high-level business cases, and the originators of the request, the idea submitters, will typically work with these subject matter experts, the SMEs, to build out the detail of the demand, identifying information such as a business case, cost, and resource estimates based on the inputted information. Now we're going to go ahead and select a new demand here. We are creating a new demand directly. And it's also important to note that a demand can also be created from an idea. It can be automated, for example, from a CRM system. And the out-of-the-box flow at the very top here, you'll also note that a demand can have its own workflow processes as well. So ultimately, a very flexible entity that can come from multiple sources and can ultimately end up in multiple sources as well. Now, you'll also note that there are only a couple of fields, only 5 fields to really get started within this record. We can see here that there's a name, a category, a project, as well as a start and end date. These are only some of the few mandatory fields that are required to really capture this demand. So you can see the top of the out-of-the-box demand management process flow at the top of the screen here is really enabling you to be flexible within your overall demand management process. You'll see that as we navigate through draft, through submission, screening, qualification, approval, and completion, you'll ultimately have to go through different approval sets and approval stages in order to get to that overall completion of the demand in the end. However, this workflow can be configured and set up to best fit your overall process and your specific needs. And you'll see here that if we go ahead and type in an example here, so let's just go ahead and call this a ServiceNow implementation. let's go ahead and pre-populate some of the fields to the form. So we'll go ahead and fill out this specific start and end date here. We'll just say that this is going to last a couple of weeks. And we'll go ahead and save the demand form there. Now, when we go back into our system here, we can also see that some of the mandatory fields that are included, like category and type, also capture a plethora of information. We can determine whether or not this is a strategic or operational initiative. And if it is something strategic, well, then what type of information are we capturing here? We can determine whether it will ultimately become an enhancement, a project, a confidential project or corporate project, program, epic or story, or perhaps some sort of scaled agile entity as well. In similar context, if we were to determine that this is an operational demand, we can also turn this into a change or perhaps some sort of process within the ITIL realm of work, like an incident, problem, or change. But let's go ahead and navigate back to our strategic side of the house and determine that this is a demand that is better navigate towards a project. So we can go ahead and scroll into the middle section here, and taking a look at some of the fields to the form, we'll also note that we can capture this demand and categorize it based on a couple of criteria, like a portfolio and a program. We can also capture and rank this specific demand based on priority or department and business unit. But in this specific example, let's go ahead and drill into our business case tab here. The business case tab was introduced in this demand workflow and this demand form because organizations wanted to document the business case in the demand form rather than having this information in a document attachment. And there is an out-of-the-box form that you can use to adjust to meet your organization's needs. The strategies and goals here that you can see on the screen, these attributes, enable the demand to be linked to the defined enterprise and business unit strategies and the goals of the organization. So we can ultimately see how these strategies and goals really enable that sort of cross-functional piece of work and really enable the business to become more strategic within the overall bodies of work that you're executing on. So you'll see here that if we decide to attach a strategy to the overarching demand, we can actually enable one of the strategies here is to grow the business. So we can save that and attach that to the form. And now we can move along our day while evaluating this demand based on its various business case, the various business case that we may have, the risks or enablers or barriers that we may have within this demand in itself. As part of building the demand and business case, organizations also need to provide estimates for cost benefit, risk impact, and resource requirements. The level of estimation really required varies between organizations, but most importantly, ServiceNow enables an organization to estimate at whatever level of detail is appropriate for them. And for the purposes of this exercise, we'll be looking at both capturing the high level and detailed levels of estimation. And some organizations only require a capital expense or CapEx or OpEx and financial benefit values that will ultimately add in as part of the overall estimation process. And we'll enter this data in as part of the financials tab. But as a rough order of magnitude, we're also able to forecast based on the line items like our capital expense, our operating expense, as well as our financial benefit within the various plans that we create for the organization in itself. So we can actually go ahead and navigate to the bottom of the screen here and begin creating our resource plans, cost plans, and benefit plans. In this example, let's go ahead and create a resource plan to really forecast for what sort of resources we'll need to take on and onboard this specific demand. If we go into the resource plan record, we can begin to understand what sorts of resources we'll need to take on this project initiative. We can specify a resource by a group, user, or role. In this situation, let's go ahead and specify a specific group. We'll query the overall groups that we have within the business, and we'll just select we need members from our ServiceNow team. And as far as a specific skill set goes, we can specifically tailor our resource plan to member preference or a specific skill set, but let's just leave them blank for now and request a couple of full-time employees for this specific use case. And we'll just say that we need 5 ServiceNow employees to take on this project, and we'll save the resource plan from here on out. Now, if we go back into the overarching demand, we can see that the overall capital expense has been changed to more accurately reflect our overall capital expense line item. We can see an overall total planned cost, a financial return, as well as an estimated return on investment based on our demand in itself. And since we've only entered in one example resource plan, we can also see how the system has automatically generated a cost plan in relation to the demand, in relation to the resource plan itself. We're also able to spawn benefit plans in order to more accurately reflect our financial benefit for the overarching demand as well. That will assist in reflecting a more accurate return on investment. However, as we continue along the overarching demand in itself, we also want to understand from a resourcing perspective, once we create that resource plan, are we able to execute upon the work that we specified? And some organizations will have a greater level of detail in terms of resource, in terms of cost and benefit estimates. But ServiceNow supports this requirement by providing the ability to create resource, cost, and benefit plans for the demand. If we wanted to expand upon our resource plans, we can go ahead into managing our resource plans themselves. And we can see that these resource plans are a key element in resource management. Resource requesters such as project managers ultimately create resource plans to ask for resources. They track effort and track costs. So we're able to see here that within our resource allocation workbench, we can expand upon the members within our organization that have a specific availability. Perhaps they want to view the overall utilization, the overall capacity for our various employees, and we can then begin to allocate them out to the resource plan that we requested. But coming back into the demand here, we're also able to understand from a demand perspective, the various assessments that we'll need to really understand whether or not this demand is something that's impactful to the business. Is it something that will transform the business as a strategic imperative, or is it something that's better classified as an operational initiative, like a defect or an enhancement? So understanding the assessment data of your demand is also another incorporated field type that comes out of the box with impact, risk, value, perhaps a t-shirt size or an overall score and assessment required. So you can also incorporate your own assessment as well. But what you'll note here is that the overarching assessment itself can be flexible and it can fit your specific needs within the business. Now, keeping this assessment data tab in mind, as we begin to navigate through the demand and fill out the various fields needed to submit, to screen, to qualify and approve this demand, we'll then decide whether or not we need to prioritize this demand to turn into a greater entity later down the line. Now, as you can see, the demand itself is a very flexible entity. We can capture a lot of different information, such as our risks, our issues, our decisions, and our actions. We can even capture various change requests as part of the demand itself. But what's also important to note is that this demand form is a configurable form, meaning that it can be modified and configured to really best fit your specific needs within the business. But as we begin to further prioritize the needs of the business, we can then begin to look at alternative views within the ServiceNow environment to really help prioritize our work efforts. So we can navigate to what we call the demand workbench and begin navigating through all the different demands that we have within the view of our demand manager, or BRM, our business review manager here. So we can see all of the demands based on our risk, value, and sizing, and we can compare and contrast how they weigh against one another. The various demands within our organization can ultimately be stack ranked against one another, and we'll be able to understand which demands are the priority of the organization based on those various assessment metrics that we highlighted earlier, like risk, value, and size. Perhaps some of these demands here on the workbench have low risk or high risk, low value, and high size. Whereas some of the demands in the top left have low risk, high value, and high size. And these may be better candidates to be able to take on some sort of greater initiative, like a change or a project perhaps, where I'm able to spawn initiatives from the demand workbench in itself without having to navigate away into an alternative view. Now, this demand workbench is great when it comes to assisting in evaluations of your demand and evaluation of any sort of initiative that you need to further prioritize. So it comes in handy when it comes to assessing based on various metrics like risk and value. But let's go back into our slide deck here and summarize some of the key takeaways that we've gone through as it relates to the exercise. When it comes to demand management, it's very important to align these strategies and goals to the work that you're doing, making sure that you can prioritize work effectively for the business ultimately enables your business to reduce projects that are dying in flight and become more strategic in the work that you're doing. You can also leverage ServiceNow's automated workflows to become more efficient, as we've seen in the exercise, where you're able to leverage multiple stage gates, multiple streamlined workflows to become more efficient and align the business needs to the work that's planned. And ultimately, you'll always need to communicate with the various team members, because a project or any initiative within the business does not involve a singular person. It involves multiple stakeholders, multiple teams, and multiple bodies of work in order to successfully execute and grow the business. This is ultimately enabled by ServiceNow's demand management, but is further continued in project management, which we'll get into in just a moment here. Now, within this section of the overall how-to clinic, we'll be covering project management as a whole. But to kick things off, we'll actually be navigating through an exercise of project planning and execution. We'll be using this exercise to be able to align goals in work and be able to understand how we can leverage the project management module to deliver on our project planning efforts and initiatives. Now I'm going to go ahead and navigate back to my system here and take a look at the environment back from my ServiceNow ecosystem. And taking a look at my ServiceNow environment, I'm currently logged in now as a project manager named Paul Martin. Now, Paul is going to be walking us through a couple of different perspectives. Paul will walk us through the project itself, as well as the different work streams that help to enable fluid project management from team to team within the ServiceNow environment via our project workbench. Now, we can see here that exposed here is the list of our projects. Now, just like within the demand, ServiceNow provides a single location for managing all projects, both strategic and operational. And demands or projects can be really thought of as execution items of work. The originators of the projects, however, can differ because these projects can come through a number of different work streams, whether they're ideas, demands, through a sort of workflow and automated processes like a CRM solution, or perhaps they've come in through a request via our ServiceNow portal. Now, if I were to create a brand new project, let's say, and I wanted to navigate to the entire project record to better understand how these projects work, I can go ahead and expose a new project record and see that the project itself captures a plethora of information. The project itself can also contain a couple of key elements that are native to any sort of project template. You can see here that I can also create a project straight from the templates themselves. So if I wanted to create a project, for example, let's call it the ServiceNow implementation, and I wanted to navigate to some sort of project template, I can expose all of the different project templates that we have in play here. And let's just say that we want to leverage the sort of standard governance project template and pre-populate some of the fields to the form. And highlighting some of the key elements of the project here are as follows. As we give this a second to load, we'll see that within the overall project itself, once we've populated that template, we can see numerous stages within the overall project workflow lifecycle as well. We can see initiation, planning, execution, delivering, and closing as part of the overall project itself and the overall project workflow. Some of the other important data sections within the project itself also include not only the dates, details, the business case of the project, but also the financials, or perhaps the overall score of the project. And this looks very similar to the demand that we were looking at earlier. And this is because as we begin to navigate through a project process, we'll ultimately want to create some sort of greater initiative beforehand to become more strategic with the work that you were doing, to reduce those in-flight projects and become more strategic with the work that we're doing. Within the bottom of the project here, we can also expose a lot of different information related to the project, whether they're around project tasks, whether they're around various sub-projects. We can also see here that a resource plan may be pulled in from the demand in itself. A cost plan may be exposed from the demand in itself, or perhaps even a benefit plan may be pulled in from the demand in itself. But ultimately, within a project, we're able to fill out some of the key data elements that would help us navigate through the execution of this project and its tasks. But one alternative and one unique view that's unique to ServiceNow is also what we call the project workspace. So if we go ahead and navigate to our project workspace to be able to better manage our work and better manage our projects here, we can go ahead and take a look at this ServiceNow implementation initiative. Now, within the project workspace, you can think of this as a scorecard view, where we're able to view the high-level summary of our ServiceNow project, our ServiceNow implementation project, as well as other projects within our current environment here. We can see some quick KPIs around the execution type, percentage complete, the phase of our project, as well as any updates or missed milestones around the project itself. And this scorecard is a configurable view that enables your business to be able to manipulate the KPIs that you'll want to see and understand from a quick glance within your project workspace. But if I wanted to go ahead and drill into that ServiceNow implementation project, I'm granted the access into another view here, and this is called our project console. Within the project workspace, I can expose the project console and begin to understand all the different elements in relation to my project. Beginning with our analytics tab here, we can see that there are a number of different reports and a number of different dynamic reports around the items within our project details. Now, although this project is populated with some demo environment data, we can also see that this information that's provided to us has provided the project manager with some essential information around overdue tasks and milestones, any upcoming tasks that have no assignees, as well as any sort of information around our stories, our tasks by state, any task assignments or resource plans, as well as scrolling to the bottom here, any sort of cost trend analysis or benefit trend analysis that will ultimately enable us to better understand what are some of the trends going on with the financials of this project. And at the very bottom, we can also see a report around time card approval, making sure that our actual information is populated within the context of our project here. And also, we'd like to keep in mind that this project analytics tab is also a configurable dashboard, meaning that you can modify the widgets and the various reports that you see on the screen here based on the needs and the criteria of your business. We can see that we have a couple of out-of-the-box fields like phase and status. However, you can manipulate the fields to the form to make them fit your business processes and whatever is relevant to your project managers. Going back into the details of the project here, we can also begin to see a more fleshed out and a more built out project record here. We can also see other elements of the project, such as any sort of attachments that have been related to this specific project initiative, as well as documentation link, a documentation link surrounding any sort of third-party repository for any documentation that we may want to incorporate within our project record. We can also incorporate that into the details of the project. And in very similar context to the project that we went ahead and created, we can also see a lot of more contextual information around our project tasks, maybe an agile phase if this is a hybrid project, any stories in relation to that hybrid project context, as well as all the other elements of this project, including your RAID log, so your risks, your issues, your decisions, your actions, or any key stakeholders that are involved with the within the evaluation of this project. When it comes to the overall execution of the project, we'll also want to navigate to the next tab over, the planning console. Within the planning console, we're also able to enable that sort of cross-functional execution of project tasks. We can see all of the dependency information in relation to a specific project task. Furthermore, we're also able to execute upon those project tasks and create project tasks from the planning console in itself. If I wanted to go ahead and create a new child task, for instance, I could go ahead and create a brand new child task and add in that child task as part of the overall planning console itself, and add in various dependencies in relation to my project tasks and execution information. Exposing one of the project phases here, I can also see all of the different sub-project tasks in relation to a parent project task here, and all of the dependencies as it relates to that individual task itself. I can form those dependencies as I wish. I can create a finish to start relationship, finish to finish relationship in the context of our Gantt view here. And within the Gantt chart format, I'm also able to expose a plethora of information that is relevant to the project manager, whether it's a constraint that we may have, whether it's the percentage of completion of the task that we have at hand, or perhaps we want to understand who the assignee of that task is, or maybe the actual duration of that project task is. We have a lot of flexibility within the ServiceNow environment here to be able to map out a lot of the different entities based on the Gantt chart itself. And you can see here that it doesn't just include all the information that we see on the screen here. It's a configurable column header, meaning that we can add in more fields that will then determine the details of the project and extract information from the details of the project to gain more visibility on that front. When it comes to our overarching resources as well, we want to make sure that we have appropriate resources for the execution of our project. We want to make sure that we have enough planned resources, enough confirmed resources, and resources to actually allocate out to the various initiatives that we have. So we can take a look at the resource allocation workbench, and in similar context to the demand that we were looking at earlier, we can also expose all of the different resource plans and view all of the different resources that we've requested based on a heat map of our resource availability. At the very bottom here, we can also see if we go ahead and drill into one of the resource plans that we've gone ahead and created, we've requested 200 hours from our analyst group. And we've already requested that, meaning that we wanted to go ahead and navigate to our resource finder to determine who would be an appropriate resource to onboard for this specific initiative. If we go ahead and expose, for example, one of the resource plans in the bottom section, we can then begin to understand various resources as well as their overall utilization and the work that they're working on. We'll see here that Adela here, who is a portfolio manager, is working on a couple of things at the moment. So maybe we want to go ahead and take a look at someone else's overall availability who has more time to work on this initiative, like Alejandro. We can take a look at Alejandro's utilization and understand that one initiative here in the middle section here that doesn't entirely have a resource plan attached is taking up 65% of his time. Now we can begin to understand this and triage that effort and begin to understand whether or not we can confirm him for the resource plan in essence. So then we can begin the process of allocating those various resources based on an availability matrix at the bottom section here that we can again configure based on utilization, based on actuals, allocation, availability, capacity, and confirmed. And based on the needs of our business, we can then confirm and allocate out those resources to the various resource plans that we've gone ahead and created. Once we've gone ahead and allocated those resources, we'll then want an accurate reflection of the expenses of our project summary. So we can navigate to the next tab over and take a look at our financial summary. So taking a look at the financials tab here, we can expose a high-level summary view of all of the different costs, the various returns, and the benefit of our project in itself. These widgets, however, at the very top are configurable, meaning we can add in and configure and create new widgets that would fit our business process and workflow. However, there are a couple that do come out of the box, in order to support your financial visibility needs. We've provided a couple of widgets around those planned costs, those budget costs and actual costs in relation to the project itself to more accurately reflect on the details of the project from a financials perspective. And you'll also see here that at the very bottom, we're also able to drill down further based on the needs of our business. We can navigate to our cost plans. We can filter by cost types. So we can get a little bit more granular as it relates to any sort of visibility that we'll need around the various costs incurred within this project. In similar context, we can also view the benefit information for the project itself. So any sort of benefit plans that we've created for this project, we can view within the benefit plans of our financial summary. And last but not least, if we have any funding information, if we have any top-down funding information that we're doing for the project itself, we can also take a project funding approach to project management and deliver on this front. However, we don't have any sort of sources here at hand, but just want to highlight that this is also another capability. Once that is all done, once the financial information has been viewed, our resources have been allocated, our tasks have been planned, ultimately the project will continue on its execution lifecycle as more and more individuals begin to pile on and execute on this project. Keeping an up-to-date status report is also imperative to the success of any project, making sure that any gaps or any loopholes within the project execution are accounted for and appropriately mapped to some sort of solution. So we can drill into this status report here, and we can see here that it's a pretty dynamic status report that we can see some reports, some executive summary information that's incorporated, as well as KPIs around the overall status history of the overall project itself. We can see here that if we navigate to our status history, the status report will then notify us that this specific project initiative needs to adjust resources based on a new scope that we've created. And because of this alert, we can now navigate back to the details of the project and understand where the gaps within our project is and where they exist. They currently exist in the scope, and within the scope, we've realized that we've added new stories to account for new hires that are working from home, which is extremely relevant in today's society due to the overall COVID-19 pandemic. So we'll ultimately understand how we can adjust based on the needs of the business and become more adaptive and less reactive, but more proactive with the work that we're doing within our project summary here. And at the very bottom, we can also see other information around key milestones, risks, issues, decisions, and actions. But ultimately, the status report is a very flexible view that allows you to be able to configure and modify based on the various needs of the business. Now we're going to go ahead and navigate to some of our takeaways here for the overall execution of our project. Now, taking a look at the overall key takeaways from this exercise, we saw how we can tie in all of the work that we're doing to the specific strategies and goals of the business. We also saw how you're able to manage all of your work in one central location, rather than having to navigate through a bunch of different screens and a bunch of different views in order to allocate resources, in order to view a status report of the project, in order to view summary level information of the project deliverables. We can view all of that information in one central location, leveraging ServiceNow's one single pane of glass platform as a service within the project workspace. And your people matter. We saw that you can plan work in a way that will enable them to be successful by ensuring that your resources aren't over allocated, understanding who has capacity to take on a project initiative, and make them successful in the sense that we don't want to overburden the various resources that we have in our organization. We want to appropriately allocate them out to the various team members that we have at hand. You can also leverage workflow to help your processes, not hinder your processes, because you're able to automate a lot of the different concepts and a lot of the different execution items as it relates to a project. As we continue on the execution of a project, workflow will then become imperative to driving a lot of cost savings, a lot of time savings when it comes to any sort of project initiative or any sort of strategic initiative. And it's also important to continuously monitor the work that you're doing to ensure that the outcomes are being met, meaning that you have visibility and transparency into the work that we're doing via ServiceNow reporting or dashboarding or a status report. There's a number of ways that we saw today how you can view all the relevant initiatives of your project in one central location to be able to continuously monitor that work and make sure that these strategic outcomes of the business are being met by the work that you're doing. And last but not least, you'll see that the project is ultimately a cross-functional body of work, meaning that you'll always need to communicate across the various team members within an organization. But because you have all of these different tools, all of these different workflows and streamlined processes at your disposal, ServiceNow enables that communication to become much more fluid. Rather than having a lack of visibility, you have a ton of visibility into the work streams of your project, and you're able to communicate more effectively. So what are some of the next steps in your journey with ServiceNow ITBM? Well, some of the recommendations and best practices that ServiceNow has is to begin with defining an overall process, understanding that ServiceNow is a flexible entity that will fit and mold to your defined process, meaning that once you set up protocols for project delivery, you've defined how you'll leverage the scoping of work, whether it's through demand management or not. Understanding how you're scoping those bodies of work are ultimately going to help define your process. After defining that process, aligning to business strategy, prioritizing work to strategic initiatives, defining the project process also come into play to ensure that the work that you're doing, like your project initiatives, aren't in-flight projects that typically die in flight. They're more strategic imperatives that help to transform the business. And last but not least, take a phased approach to adopting a solution like project portfolio management within the ServiceNow ecosystem. We recommend the standard approach of demand management, project and portfolio, agile delivery, and then scaled agile. However, you're enabled to adopt various products in tandem, in parallel, one at a time. It's really up to you in terms of how you determine your overall phased approach to the product in ServiceNow. And you'll see here that there's a typical maturity model with our project management solution. Understanding that at the crawl stage, projects are ultimately used to manage demand delivery. Maybe projects enable reporting to provide to enable governance. Then as we begin to mature with the organization, we then begin seeing various practices growing, processes becoming more mature. Maybe a program gets developed in order to combat this sort of initial project initiative so we can become more strategic. Maybe a portfolio comes into play to become even more strategic past the portfolio and past the project and the program. And at the very last level, in level 3, where we're most mature with our workflows, with our processes, we can then begin that full visibility to monitor projects, track our planned costs against actual costs, prioritize our portfolio against our strategic execution, drive investment decisions across the business, and ultimately enable the business to become more strategic with our various initiatives at hand. To reiterate what we mentioned at the beginning here, there are a bunch of great resources that exist within the ServiceNow ecosystem for additional thought and guidance to learn more about our latest release and our latest release notes. So you can see here that there's a couple of different release notes here that we've provided around our Quebec release. Our next release is Rome, and we'll be providing context around that very shortly. So feel free to check out our doc site. We have a lot of live broadcasts, overview demos, and context around the overall product solution to help our customers become more successful within our ITBM journey. There are also additional resources within our community site. So collaboration with other organizations, other customers within our communities site, and our own ServiceNow teams as well within our ServiceNow YouTube playlist. You can also check that out, which are a bunch of additional resources that help to drive a lot of successful ServiceNow ITBM deployments. Just wanted to thank you all for joining in on today's informational session and how-to clinic around demand and project portfolio management. Just wanted to say thank you for your time today and hope to see you again soon.